House Bill 1624. Madam Secretary.
Engrossed House Bill 1624, a bill for an act to create and enact two new sections to Chapter 15.1-07 of the North Dakota Century Code relating to offering school breakfast and lunch at no cost and the School Meals Fund, to provide an appropriation, to provide for a transfer, and to provide an effective date.
Senator Shively.
Madam President, this is the a free school lunch bill that we've all heard about, talked about. We had our joint hearing a couple days ago, and it provided a lot of good discussion for and against. We spent a lot of time on there. We heard good discussion both ways. And I believe the main reason this bill is before us today is mostly to decide if you think the initiated constitutional measure will pass and therefore goes into the Constitution. This bill would do basically the same thing, but would not put it in the Constitution. And I think that's the real gist of the bill. To go over what the committee did in the process there, I'll start out with what the proponents brought up and said. First, they want to keep it out of the Constitution. I believe that's the main reason we have the bill before us today. They also said that, it was mentioned that the state is required to provide free education for all of our K-12 kids, which includes books and transportation and everything else we do. And it suggested maybe that should include meals, which is a pretty good point. Doing this would provide property tax relief, maybe property tax relief, but it would provide relief of the cost of that meals that goes to our families. So it does provide dollars back into the pockets of our parents, so that is a good point of that. And, if they use that for other things, that's a prudent way to do it. It was also mentioned that, that this could possibly be used to further our property tax effort. And it was mentioned there so that, there was a discrimination of we're paying for rich people's kids and not that. Well, it was also mentioned that, when we do property tax relief, we don't discriminate between the wealthy and the non-wealthy. So why should we discriminate between the wealthy and non-wealthy when it comes to food? Some of the opposition suggested that this might not be the most prudent way to spend state money or taxpayers' money. I mean, there was questions whether that is there, this $65 million that's suggested for this bill for the 1 year would probably be better spent going to property tax relief or other things. And it was suggested that by being in the Constitution, that's basically the first thing that comes off the table and giving no flexibility on what's the best way to spend that money. It was also suggested that there's probably not a large amount of kids that are going hungry. We all know that there's much more work to do in that, but it was suggested that what we changed last year, going from 200% to 225%, with the costs that we allocated, that we're not coming close to those numbers. So there's not hitting that target yet. It's going up to that. We also had a measure that passed the committee, but did not pass the House. But we looked at maybe tweaking it a little bit by going to 300% of poverty level, which raised that number quite considerably, and that would have put any family unit that was over 100,000 or close to 100,000 would get free and reduced. But we didn't think that would have the effect. And like I said, that passed the committee, but it did not pass this House. It was also suggested that that we, the attempts of, by doing the free lunch and making that in there, that we would affect some of our federal program monies of how that would come to that, because right now you have to sign up for free and reduced. And if it's free and in the Constitution, why would you sign up for it? We did have conversations about that with DPI, and it sounds like there's ways around that, but it's still some effect that, that we would just leave federal money on the table and not take advantage of it. Both this and the constitutional measure says that we should take full advantage of the federal dollars first, but there's still a bit of a worry that we wouldn't do that. So, that's the gist of the pros and cons of the bill. I mean, like I said, I think the biggest concern that we have for that is that the initiated constitutional measure would put it in the Constitution. A couple thoughts of that. It seems to me, one of the things that we heard or suggested was that, that if the constitutional measure would pass, which I believe is 7 other states already have this, but this would be the only one that would be in the state constitutions. So that's a bit of a scary thought. It also seems that we have trouble with our way that we have initiated measures for our Constitution. My opinion, they seem to be real easy for out-of-state money to affect that. We've seen other situations of that where we're doing the same thing with the free lunch bill as what we did with maybe marijuana and some of the other stuff, the Heritage Fund. I mean, just trying to keep it out of the Constitution and being able to manage the resources of the state best by legislative action instead of by a mandate of the Constitution. We also had testimony from some of the proponents of the measure, and there was questions were asked, like to North Dakota United, if this measure would pass, would they stop their efforts of supporting the initiated measure? I think we all got an email yesterday or last night that suggested that if this bill would pass this session, North Dakota United's efforts would cease to support the Constitution measure. This bill that we're discussing today, the only reason it's here on the special session is because of the opportunity we got. If there would have not been a special session, we would have not had the opportunity to make this choice and do what we're trying to do, which is to keep it out of the Constitution. Another thing that would happen with this bill is that if it passes, it would take effect the fall of this year. So we'd have 1 year of information. So the free lunches would start earlier, would start this fall. We'd have an idea. The allocation for the money is $65 million. That's the estimated cost of what this bill would cost us. But it would give us the flexibility to determine where that comes from. This bill is 1 year in length. But I mean, just like everything that we do, it has to be reappropriated in the next session, and that's the same thing with this one. So that the idea would be, this is for 1 year, but next session, then we would have the opportunity to determine how to go forward with that. I think most people assume that if this passes, that we will be paying for free lunch, and it would continue on to the future. And I would agree with that, except that if things would really get different or change or very difficult for the state, at least we'd have an opportunity to how to best manage the state money. I mean, and that's kind of the gist of the bill, and that's my reason for being a co-sponsor and with the other sponsors of the bill. I think it's important that initiated measures are important, and it's right to have the people to say what they do. But it's a bit scary to me that when out of state requires or suggests that before they give money, they're going to put it in the Constitution. And I think that's what's really flawed with our system. I think the discussion is good, and these are all valid points for and against. I don't think I'm going to change anybody's mind by anything. But I think this is the job of the carriers to explain the action that the committee did. I hope I did that. And Madam President, of course, the vote count, I think everybody knows that. The House passed it with a little bit bigger majority. The Senate side of that Appropriations Committee was a difference of 1 vote after 7 votes. So I think this is an issue that you can consider greatly. To me, the biggest issue is on that. I believe the measure going to the people, it would pass. I think that's a if that's what the people want, that's fine. But the idea of putting in the Constitution is what I'm opposed to, and so that's why I support this bill. And I would ask you also to vote green.
Senator Clemens.
Madam President, I stand opposed to House Bill 1624 for several reasons. We currently have appropriated money for free lunches, and those funds are not being fully utilized at our current rate. And so that's one of the reasons I don't see why we continue to put more money into something that's not even being used currently. This bill would take away more responsibility of the family. We have families now that are providing lunches for their children. We pass this bill. Now they don't have to do that. We talk about families being the foundation of our state. Now we as a government are going to start allowing them to get by with less responsibility for their children. It's going to create more dependence on state and federal government. When I took this office, I made a pledge that I would work for less regulations and less government. And that's one of the reasons that I'm going to be opposed to this bill. This is creating more government, both from the state and the federal. It's going to be growth of government. This is going to cost the state of North Dakota more effort besides the money. It always takes people to implement these programs. So now we're growing the growth of our government. It's going to be a financial burden to our state. We've already been seeing forecasts that we may be working with less revenue next session than we currently are. And now we're adding another $65 million to our expenses. And then lastly, this bill is before us because there's the threat of an initiated measure. I remember several sessions ago, we faced the same thing with the marijuana bill. We were told we have to pass legislation. Otherwise, this initiated measure is going to come and we're going to be stuck with their language rather than ours. Well, what happened? We defeated the bill in the legislature, and the initiated measure never took place. We're here today because we're fearful of what may happen. I think that is a very poor way to legislate the policies of North Dakota. We can stay here and pass this law. This law will probably never be overturned either. Who's going to have if we don't have the courage now to vote against this, what session is going to have the courage to remove it? Out of fear probably of public outcry. So I say we defeat this measure. If the this statute, this bill, if the initiated measure does get on the ballot, then we each have our responsibilities to talk with our constituents and give our reasons why placing this in our Constitution sets a very dangerous precedence, because now this would be a signal to the out-of-staters and in-state alike. If you want something placed in Constitution of North Dakota, just threaten the legislature with it and they'll pass the law for you. So I thank you for this. And
Senator Meyer.
Madam President, I sat on the Joint Appropriations Committee this week, and I just wanted to bring more of an appropriations discussion to this debate. And listening to the speaker of the bill, or the carrier of the bill, yeah, this probably won't change anyone's opinion on how they'll vote, but I think it still is worthy of a conversation. As you know, kids aren't going hungry in our schools. We have passed laws requiring that these schools provide a meal that matches what they provide the other students. I was a bigger fan of the other bill we considered. I would have liked to have seen that income means test go up a little bit rather than a complete overtaking of the free school lunch. Last biennium, we passed $1.3 million for school food service grants and another $6 million for free meal program. In our discussion, we asked how much of that $6 million was spent, and it's $1 million, Madam President. So when we consider this in a biennium, that's a biennium $6 million. We're going to take this to $130 million, and I think the citizens of North Dakota deserve to know that number. The further along here, we talk about encouraging. There's that word in there, encouraging folks to apply for federal dollars. Now, again, there are some moments where they will apply for SNAP benefits and that'll carry over, but we will be leaving millions of dollars on the table from the federal government and putting that squarely on the backs of North Dakota citizens. You know, I talked to some county or some school administrators and some teachers in my community, and the administrators are saying this is going to be a problem because they're concerned that we'll start making cuts in other ways. Now, again, I don't know if it's going to go in the Century Code, if it's going to go in the Constitution, but there are concerns that if it does, regardless, These numbers won't go down, and we're going to have to find dollars elsewhere. And finally, we just, again, I know we want to have that flexibility, but I do have concerns about where we're going to be financially in the next couple of years. We've been told that we're going to be $1 billion less than we were last year in the general fund. These are all things I just want you all to consider. I know I'm not going to convince anyone to vote, but I think the citizens of North Dakota deserve to know these numbers as they hear us debate and make their decisions going forward.
Senator Mathern.
Thank you, Madam President. And members of the Senate, I think there are 3 reasons to vote yes on this bill. First of all, we have been working towards upgrading our school meal programs. We're talking about getting local foods in there, organic foods, foods that are of quality. And I think having a standard program throughout the state in terms of covering all children helps in that regard. Fits right in with trying to have a healthy state. Second of all, we've all been doing some wonderful things to reduce property taxes. This is just another little step where we take on a responsibility on the part of the state of a program that just takes off the pressure from property tax payers. But I think the most important reason to vote yes is this just moves us forward in the development of civilization itself. Basically, we have the situation where people need food, shelter, education, health care, and a decent paying job. Those are things that we work on. Those are principles that our civilization is moving towards. Those are responsibilities that we have as legislators. And the basic one is food. So let's not quibble about, do we have food for the rich or the poor, for the handicapped or the unhandicapped, for the young or the old? Let's just say everybody's going to have food. And I think that's what this bill says. Let's just get it off the table and say it's a basic right, and we're going to always have that addressed in our society. So, members of the Senate, I hope we vote yes. I'm not scared about a ballot measure. What the people decide, I think that's probably even a better option than this. But this is what is before us right now, and this is what would feed another group of children. I encourage a yes vote. Thank you.
Senator Powers.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Let's respect the process and our constituents. Dear fellow senators, let's vote no on HB 1624. As one of your colleagues, I've been reflecting on HB 1624, and now I ask all of us, why are we rushing this bill through a special session? And why act now when a direct democratic path is already underway? A coalition, a local one, along with the a similar national coalition that does nonprofit, works out of Washington, D.C. They are actively collecting signatures for initiated measure that could go before the voters in November of this year. That measure would mandate free breakfast and lunch for all of our approximately 119,000 public school students K through 12. By letting it go to the ballot, we allow the people's voice to decide statewide through a vote. Such a mandate, once enacted, would be very hard to change later. providing stability but reducing our future flexibility as legislators. That's why HB 1624 was brought forward by a small group of legislators. They seem to craft this legislation to sidestep the ballot process. It delivers similar universal free meals starting next year, or 2026, 2027 year, but places the program in the Century Code instead of seeking more permanent protection. That statutory approach makes it much easier for us or future assemblies to amend, repeal, or adjust if costs balloon, revenues tighten, or priorities evolve. The bill pulls $65 million from the Strategic Investment Improvement Fund, built on oil, gas revenues, and legacy earnings. These funds are reserved to all 780 North Dakotans through broad tax relief, infrastructure, economic stability, and other statewide needs. Not to lock them in to subsidizing meals for 119,000 students while shortchanging everyone else. We shouldn't have advanced such a sweeping change in a special session with so little time for our constituents. The tight timeline limited public awareness and meaningful engagement. While hearings happened, the compressed format didn't allow the full, transparent input of our constituents that they deserve. Polls showing support aren't always reflective of the full range of views across our state. As senators, we represent every resident, not just those with school-age kids, and we have an obligation to insist on robust, inclusive consideration when we need to hear from. We didn't hear from the 167 public school superintendents who will have to implement these mandates and new guidelines. We didn't hear the voices from the roughly 75% households in the state that don't have school-age children. Pushing these forward risks ignoring long-term budget strains, which you've already heard about, added administrative loads on our schools, and the concerns of the majority of our taxpayers. The ballot measure offers a cleaner, more accurate, accountable way for North Dakotans to have their say. I strongly urge us to vote no on House Bill 1624. Let's defeat it here in the Senate. Allow the people to decide directly via the ballot if they choose, or at the very least, defer this to the full 2027 regular session, where it can have a proper notice, broader testimony, and the deliberation this deserves. We were elected to represent all North Dakotans, not to preempt their voice on major policy shifts like this. I would recommend that we vote no on this bill. Thank you.
Senator Engett.
Thank you, Madam President. It's good to be back amongst friends. So to begin, I wholeheartedly endorse every single child in North Dakota having the right to enjoy both breakfast and lunch. This is the right thing to do, providing nourishment to the children of North Dakota. However, in my mind, if this bill is to be adopted, it will quickly morph into an entitlement that will plague future generations. Our children and our children's children will be forced to bear the burden of our attempt to foster goodwill by endorsing a bill that will fall little short of turning North Dakota into a nanny state. Hypothetically, the projected cost will be around $65 million. However, I think we can all foresee the likelihood of the projected $65 million turning into a very real $150 million, give or take, in short order. We need to face a couple of realities. Today, around 51% of our budget comes from production and extraction taxes. We all know that our beloved Bakken faces an existential crisis. If we don't crack the code for EOR in short order and get the necessary sweep infrastructure in place, we will see declining revenues and our budget will find itself experiencing major shortfalls. That's the first problem that merits considerable concern. Next, oil prices have taken a hit, and we will have ample supply around the world. Continental Resources just shut down their drilling operations in North Dakota. Projections tell us that our 2027 state income will likely see a reduction in the neighborhood of $1 billion. In spite of economic conditions deteriorating, we choose to increase our spending at the state level. While the people of North Dakota talk about having to tighten their belt, at the state level, we choose to let a notch out. Is this prudent? Can we justify doing so? Understand that there's the likelihood of a constitutional ballot measure being approved by the good people of North Dakota, and that there is a perception that it is highly probable it will be passed. I also understand that this is not the desired outcome for most of us in the legislature, as it would be nice to have the opportunity to make adjustments when we face hard decisions. However, there is one very big benefit of the outcome being a constitutional amendment. If we face that outcome, it is the people themselves that will need to recognize and choose to place this financial noose around their necks. They themselves will bear the burden of making a financial harmful decision that ultimately forces the state to raise taxes to cover the ever-growing state budget. An important caveat that needs to be mentioned is that I spoke to several of my constituents, and none of them was in favor of the state taking on this task and the financial burden that comes along with it. To close, I support an approach where the state would cover any potential shortfalls in funding meals for children who are unable to pay for the school meal. I fully support the state covering the cost to ensure that every school district is made whole when shortfalls occur. This would guarantee every child gets fed, that no school district is burdened with the cost of feeding children, and the cost to the state would be both justifiable and reasonable. Now is not the time to be laying this obligation on the state. A more reasonable approach can be found, and it's up to us to find it. Let's keep taxes low in North Dakota. For those reasons and more, I oppose this bill.
Senator Lee.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam President of the Senate. Just a couple of things that I wanted to mention since term limits hadn't been implemented yet, and I've been around for a while, is that we've had some measures that actually do reflect what happens when it's a constitutional amendment instead of being a bill, instead of us having the ability to deal with it on a statutory basis. Unless my memory is totally faulty, the legislature twice defeated the idea of medical marijuana being legal in North Dakota, but that was passed with an initiated measure. What you may not know or may not recall is the fact that the people who were drafting it, even with help from people out of state, money involved in that one for sure, said that you could purchase medical marijuana and that would be fine, except there was existing statute that said it was a felony if you were caught with it. So possession was a felony. So you could buy the stuff, but if you got a traffic ticket and somebody saw, and the law enforcement officer said that you had a marijuana product in your car, you were going to be charged with a felony. You know why we were able to fix that? The legislature was able to fix it because that was not a part of the language in the initiated measure. The felony being the penalty was in existing statute. So in the following legislative session, because the voters had passed the idea that medical marijuana could be purchased in North Dakota, the legislature killed that portion of statute. And so it's no longer a felony. That is one of the very main reasons that I support this bill. I have concerns, just as have been expressed, about some of the other things with this measure. But I am quite confident that it's going to pass. And I'm not a gambling person, but a small lunch bet, if somebody wants to take it, would be fine. But anyway, the point is we just have to recognize that this is something that's very popular, apparently, with the voters of North Dakota, and we are supposed to be here to represent their interests, but also to do it in a really good way. And there is inadequate information, always for us, but certainly for the members of the public as well. I heard on the news this morning that one of the bills that we just have been considering was a sale of the golf course in Grand Forks. Sorry, I shouldn't have mentioned the city. Apologize for that. But you all know what I'm talking about. And we all know, because we've considered this bill, that it has to do with 6 acres having to do with a big infrastructure project. And this is not taking away that golf course. And so media needs to be careful, and social media, we have no control over that at all. So one gets a variety of opinions expressed on those screens that we watch all the time. We also forget sometimes that we have the advantage here and a responsibility because of it. But the advantage is that we have hearings to which people who have an interest from every perspective can come and testify. We are the ones who have the better opportunity to learn more comprehensively about the issues facing us. And we have a big responsibility to sort through that and make sure that we come up with the right answer. It is not that way with out-of-state money and out-of-state forces and social media folks who encourage participation and support for a particular issue, whatever it is, through other means. And we need to put on our big boy and big girl pants and do what's right here and assume some responsibility for that. We hear also about one of the big oil companies ceasing drilling in North Dakota. Well, they're not drilling any new wells, I believe, I was told. But the ones that are currently in place will continue to pump. We also know that it's not a good long-term plan, but it doesn't mean that the company is pulling out of the state. So we need to be careful about this. We can't defer this to the 27th session because if the constitutional amendment passes, we can't do anything about it. And the benefit with the statute is that we can. So I think we need to really remember that. The two things that I think really lead me to the conclusion that I should support the bill, in spite of my reservations as well, are that the statute can be changed by legislation. And if that initiated measure passes, we can't do anything about it ever until there's another constitutional amendment passed. The other thing is, I really don't like seeing the legacy fund being listed as the source of funding if the state legislature does not appropriate adequately to cover these lunches. I firmly believe that legacy fund has a long-term function for North Dakota that is extremely important. And we are violating the purpose of that and the way it's supposed to work if we start using it like a sugar bowl. So those are two policy positions that bother me as someone who really cares about the subject and supports some of the objections. But because of those two important reasons, that we can't amend anything in the 27 legislature if that constitutional amendment passes, and we are allowing fiddling with the legacy fund as a means of supporting it, I think it's very important to support this bill so that we can move forward. And as the legislature sees things in the future that need attention, the people who are here, whether it's any of us or people who follow us later, will have the opportunity to do that. So I do encourage us to vote in favor of this measure. It may have warts that some of us don't like, but you know what? The face looks pretty good when we look at the alternative. Please vote yes on 1624.
Senator Meardahl.
Well, Madam President, I don't want to keep this longer than it already has been, but We're only here for one reason today at this point of having to make this choice. One reason only, and that is that our Constitution stands naked on Main Street. Let me repeat that. Our Constitution to the people in North Dakota stands naked on Main Street. You can take a dart, you can sit in California, New York, or any other blue state with big money, throw a dart, and change the Constitution of North Dakota. When are we going to have the courage? In this chamber, more so, we've had the courage to pass some bills, but when are we going to have the courage? And when is the House next door going to have the courage to take up the fact that our Constitution is vulnerable? Other lawmakers in other states are noticing this. I don't know, maybe some of our most constitutional people, knowledge people, Madam President, in this chamber, knows when the U.S. Constitution last was amended. I don't recall. And I think most of you now are going to pick up your phones and start Googling because you can't remember. And it's not like we're a lot of young people in here. Sorry. A lot of gray hair in front of me, So, but we don't, it's very, very difficult, Madam President, to change the Constitution of the United States of America and to change the Constitution in other states. By the way, of the states that have passed this, none of them have been constitutional. So we are here today because we are being squeezed, not by grassroots North Dakotans, by the way. And somebody might say that this is that. There's millions of dollars standing outside of the state waiting to gather these signatures. And if we hadn't had a special session, Madam President, this would not be a question. So instead, we are being manipulated, we're being coerced and pushed to pass this. Now, the political part of me, Madam President, fully understands. I fully understand the argument of the former speaker. I get that. But I trust the people in North Dakota. And I want to say to the people in North Dakota, we trust you, but be aware of what you're doing. Because our system of government that I immigrated into here in the United States and in this state, and that I took an oath to, both as a citizen and before this assembly, is a republic where you elect your officials, hopefully at the ballot, trust that they have the brains and the principles and the judgment to do what the people want us to do. But if we continue this, every 2 years, our Constitution has changed. Every 2 years in the last few years. We should just get rid of this assembly. Let's rule the state by constitutional measure. Be cheaper. And I'm being facetious, but that's how passionate I am about this. And I would challenge this body here and the body next door, next session, whoever is privileged to sit here, to please come up with things to protect the Constitution, which is protecting the people of North Dakota from out-of-state interest groups that cannot get their people elected here, and therefore they go to the Constitution. It's easy to get those signatures. Hey, I can mention some higher ed football games. You go after the game and you throw out a word, pink roses on Valentine's Day. Hey, I believe in that. Ethics, I believe in that. School, feed kids, I believe in that. I'm pro-life, I believe in that. But they don't see the rest of it. So be cautious how we vote today. I'm not going to change any votes either. The other thing I want to mention, Madam President, is are we going to go with our heartstrings? Or are we as leaders going to go with facts and evidence today? Yes, I'm split in half because my political savvy says this is a good thing, like the speaker from Fargo said. But my principles said the opposite of what another speaker from Fargo said, that we're advancing the society here in our lives. Yeah, we're advancing it down toward socialism. That's where we're advancing it toward. So we can make whatever vote you want today, but at the end of the day, we have to have the guts and the will to start being leaders and protecting our Constitution, and that starts next session. I struggled with this vote today, but I've also heard from numerous superintendents and teachers and educators in my district that don't want this. We met with a group of education specialists yesterday for rural schools and small schools. They're going to get hurt long-term by this. Schools with 200 and less students that are very vital in rural areas, this is a budget issue for them. It's going to go on them. And for the people in North Dakota, if this vote fails today and we go to a measure, really know what you're voting on that measure in November. Really know what you're voting on. You're voting on burdening yourself with taxes. You're voting on an issue that doesn't exist. Every kid in our school gets fed the same meal. No longer, when I was on school board, giving peanut butter sandwich to kids that parents were losers and wouldn't pay. And by the way, when I was on the school board, Madam President, it wasn't the poor people that didn't sign up. It was wealthy people in the valley that didn't pay their bills because they didn't have to. So that's local control. That's local control of school boards, how to deal with that. We happen to go and do a collection from them to set a standard in our school district that you shouldn't do that. But facts are children are not going hungry. The facts are our Constitution is naked on Main Street for any out-of-state millionaire to change. And that is why we're here today. And I think that point needs to be heard loud and clear. Thank you.
Senator Cleary.
Madam President, members of the Senate, I don't have a crystal ball for how this will go when it's on the ballot this fall, but I did want to offer a few thoughts on to why I support this measure today and why I think we should vote green on it. And namely that I view this proposal as one of the most clear and most direct ways to help working families in our state with the rising cost of living. Inflation, we need to be clear, has hammered North Dakota families. Health insurance premiums, we're fortunate here that we get our insurance through the state. But I would encourage members to talk to their neighbors who are on the health insurance exchanges on how those bills are going to impact their families. Homeownership is at an incredibly difficult time for first-time home buyers. And while I'm very supportive of the property tax relief we've done over the years, that doesn't help folks who are renting. And something like this would. And that's not to mention childcare. The costs associated with raising children have just risen dramatically over the past couple decades. And for a lot of families, childcare is more than the cost of mortgage. So I say these things just to reiterate the point that children are expensive. Those costs have risen dramatically. And when people decide whether to start or grow a family, cost is often one of the highest things that is cited as a barrier to that. One of the benefits to this proposal in making it universal is that it doesn't add bureaucracy. It expands this to all families. And I think that's why we've seen such good reaction to the primary residence credit we passed. That just impacts everyone the same, $1,600. In the same way, $750 approximately for the cost of meals. In many ways, for those families, as they're sitting around the kitchen table, functions exactly like a tax cut. It's a cost associated with their children's education that they're no longer paying. And I agree with the previous comments on prudence, on personal responsibility, family responsibility. But to be clear, this is a cost associated with education. And I think when folks ask us what we're using their tax dollars for, is a responsible way to send that directly back to them. There's no special interests associated with this. This isn't going to some bureaucracy that citizens won't see. It's not going to a special project that they'll never know how many of their tax dollars went to it. It's going directly to their checkbooks at a time when raising children is more and more expensive. So I appreciate your consideration this morning. I'd respectfully ask for a green vote.
Senator Shively.
Madam President, just want to comment on the initiated constitutional measure. The thing is this is going to go forward, and the measure says, are you in favor of providing free lunch for children? Well, who's going to oppose that? I mean, that's the thing. There's no coalition that's going to stand up and put money to fight this because that's not there. I mean, and that's my dilemma with a constitutional measure like this. I mean, we understand budgets. I mean, that's our job. We do that. This measure does not say, are you in favor of free lunch, or does it affect any other budget? Are you in favor of free lunch if we have to reduce teacher pay, or do we have to not pick your roads so much? I mean, that's the thing is that's our thoughts and that's our job. The problem is I think there's a opinion out there that the state has endless number of revenues that we can do this, and they are in favor of free lunch. I think it's our job. I mean, yeah, we need to educate them, but as a body, we can't do that. I mean, it's not right for us to do that. As a citizen and as an independent, I can go out and write editorials and talk to people and that. But the real thing is out there is when they look at an initiated measure like that, it says, are you in favor of free lunch? Well, who's not? But it doesn't say, are you in favor of free lunch? if it's going to cost you something else in your services. And that's our job. Is my main reason why I don't want it in the Constitution. I think this bill prevents that, and I think it's probably the only way that'll prevent that.
Senator Brownberger.
Thank you, Madam President. As I'm listening to the debate, I think there's a couple of things that I have heard that I want to address. And one of them is anecdotal from my mother. My mother, before she retired, she worked in the kitchen and ran the kitchen at my alma mater. One of the things that she was struggling with at the end of her career, before she retired, was getting trucks to actually come to the schools because the orders were not big enough. So she would have to take time out of her day of her working career and drive 30 miles each direction to pick up the supplies needed to make those school meals. I think this bill, if we do this, will make sure that those schools can have larger orders, so that could potentially be able to have more efficiency in those programs and allow students, those trucks, to actually come to them instead of having to take time out of somebody that's supposed to be making those meals go and get the necessary ingredients for them. So I think this will provide efficiency in the school programs, especially our rural schools. The second thing is, multiple polls have showed that 80% of North Dakotans believe we should be doing this. Yes, we should be good stewards of what taxpayer dollars go towards. And I will tell you that I think more people would rather go to feed our children than it would be to build the next data center in the state of North Dakota. So we need to make a choice on where we spend those dollars. And I will guarantee that our citizens want us to spend our dollars back on our citizens, not to some outstate corporations that we have a tendency to do a lot in this state. Thank you, and I will be voting green.
Senator Magrum.
Madam President, may we be on the eighth order for the purpose of a floor amendment?
The Senate will be on the eighth order. Senator Magrum.
Madam President, I move amendment number 25.1395.05001.
Does each senator have a copy of the amendment? Senator Magrum.
Second that.
Does everybody have one? I have some extras here. Well, first of all, Madam President and honorable senators, I'm bringing this Hog House amendment to House Bill 1624 because actually it's, they always say if you don't agree with something, then provide a solution. So that's what I'm trying to do here. I'm giving us a solution. And so I campaigned hard this last election, and nobody asked me to go up here and fight for a free lunch. Nobody. But almost every door I went to said, we need property tax relief. You need to go fight for that. And right before we came up here for special session, I talked to a number of my constituency, and they said, we don't want free lunch. Go up there and fight for more property tax relief. If you guys got this money to spend it on property tax relief, because the property, they all know that if you're going to spend $65 million on free lunch, 30% has been reported goes for waste. That's $19.5 million in the trash. That's going to be hauled to the landfills, and that's another cost that's not even calculated into that $19.5 million of waste. And so they don't want that money wasted. They want it to go for property tax relief. Right now, there's 150,000 households that are estimated to benefit from the primary residence property tax credit we just passed in this last session. That's up from 145,000 households. And the increase, according to Legislative Council, is due to new homes coming into the system, as well as homeowners that didn't know about the tax credit that will apply this year. They have time yet to apply. So there's 150,000 primary residences. And if we add this amendment would add $450 to the $1,600 to 2,050, and that takes effect this year. So this next tax cycle, everybody would get $2,050, and that starts now. I mean, if you sell your property, you're going to get your share. That's 60, or it would be 2,050 if we'd pass this. And that money would go into the Legacy Property Tax Relief Fund from the SIF fund, which is what I think this bill that they're proposing, that's where the money would come from. That's 65 million. So instead of putting it for spending it for free lunch, we would put it in the property tax relief fund. So this sum that I'm proposing is identical. It's $65 million, and it would have to be renewed so would the free lunch would have to be renewed next session. But this amendment, if we pass it, it would actually zero out an extra 10,000 homes. Right now, 50,000 homes out of that 150,000 have zero property tax. This would actually add 10,000 homes we would zero out. So if you want to try to prevent fraud, give the money to the people, put it in their pockets. You do free lunch, that's just more fraud. There's going to be people. We don't know what the fraud's going to be, but there'll be more fraud, a lot of more waste of food. And, we talk about daycares and free lunch. Just let the people have the money and let them keep it in their pocket. Then they don't need more subsidies from the government. They'll have their money and they can be comfortable in their home knowing that they own their home eventually without a bunch of property taxes. So this amendment looks at this long term, and it's not discriminatory like the bill that we're looking at. It does keep the homeschoolers out of the equation, which, I mean, how is that fair? They're staying home, they're paying the school tax already, and now we're going to be cutting them out of this free lunch, which I'm sure they don't want it. They don't want the government in their business. That's why they homeschool, but we're going to be taking their taxes and giving it to somebody else, and they're still feeding their children at home. This amendment does align with our goal of zero property taxes. That was our goal last session. I thought it was a noble goal. I thought we did really well. The Senate was very strong on reducing property taxes, and I don't think we should get away from that goal. That's a really good goal. I think the people really appreciated it. I know they did. I heard it from a lot of them. There's this goal that of passing this so-called free lunch bill is to supersede a potential initiative to force the state to provide free lunch. They say if we pass that we can adjust it. I mean, what are we going to adjust? It's free lunch. It's just a matter of the funding. If we put this into law, what legislator in the future is going to remove it? That's been brought up eloquently by other speakers. There's nobody going to remove that. I mean, some of us aren't even going to be running for election again, and if we don't have the courage to stop this now, the future legislators aren't going to. So, what's the difference if it's in the Constitution? It's a constitutional measure does allow the legislature to fund it in different ways besides the legacy funds. So what's going to happen? I mean, my vision from being here is them future legislators pulling back K through 12 funding, which would increase property taxes, which goes against our goal of reducing property taxes. It's totally going the opposite direction of what our goal is here. There's 9 states right now that provide free lunch, and they're all fraud-bearing states: California, Illinois, Michigan, Vermont, Maine, New Mexico, Minnesota, Massachusetts, Colorado. I don't know why we're letting a political organization try to bully us into doing their work. If they want this, let them go out and sell it. Let them go out and get the signatures. Let them fund it. Let them promote it. This amendment would help build wealth for our residents. It builds wealth by reducing their property taxes. It doesn't spend money on lunch. It builds wealth in the state. It's a wealth building amendment. As I said, this amendment promotes our mission of reducing and eventually eliminating property taxes. Hopefully we can go further and help the ag guys out next session and do more, but this is a good move. As I said, I was asked by many of my constituents to propose this amendment, basically to show what the same amount of money spent to reduce property taxes would do. But no matter how it turns out, the point is we have to make tough choices. And what do we want to do? Property tax reduction or other programs? And don't be afraid to support this amendment because the House will have to come back tomorrow. It's their bill. It's not our bill. They brought it. That's what happens. You bring a bill here, you don't know what's going to happen. So it's a special session. We were supposed to be focusing on health transformation, rural health transformation program. Now we're talking about something else. So they brought it. Let them come back tomorrow. Let's give them something to come back for. The question's going to come up on, is this germane? Well, I looked in Black's Law Dictionary, and I found this, it says, what's the definition of a welfare state? A nation in which the government undertakes various social insurance programs, such as unemployment compensation, old age pensions, family allowances, food stamps, and aid to the blind or deaf. I would consider this a family allowance. School free lunch is a family allowance. Property tax reduction is a family allowance. I've heard people say I'm a family of one. It might be one individual living in their home. They're a family. So everybody's primary residence is a family. So if that isn't germane, I don't know what it is, but you can argue that, and maybe the courts could argue it eventually, but I don't know. But I think it's germane. And as I said, that 30% waste, that's a big number, that 19.5 million. The potential fraud in this thing, we don't know are they gonna, the kids that go up to the local C-store for lunch, do they get paid for the students in the school or actual meals served? How do they plan for that? Are they going to bill us anyway because the kids went out uptown to eat? Well, we made the food. They didn't show up. State's got to pay. Where otherwise the parents are paying, and they're like, the kid went up to town. Well, then the parents paid for that. They went uptown to eat. And when they asked their child, did you eat in school today? Well, yeah, I ate in school. Well, then they pay for the school. Or if they go uptown, then they pay for that. But the school's going to be billing us because the kid went uptown. Parents paid for that anyway. The child didn't go in and eat. The school's got to get paid. They prepared the food. Well, throw it in the garbage then. What else are you going to do with it? Well, Madam President, I hope you'll support this amendment. I don't really know why we have to be in a hurry. We don't have a limit on the time we're here. Like I said, the House passed this over to us. Let's pass it back to them and make them come back and do their work and let's do something good for the people. Let's not just give them another free lunch that's just going to be wrought with fraud and be bullied by this organization that thinks we have to bend to them because it's constitutional. Let them go and do the work. Let them put their money where their mouth is and go out there and sell this thing, because I can guarantee you, just from talking to the people in my district and the other people I know in the state, it does not pass. I will bet on that. And I bet they don't get 45%. because people do not want to pay more in property tax. And all you got to do is tell them to fund this, you're going to be paying more in property tax, and they will vote against it. So, and I think that's why this is here, because they already know that. They're scared. They're like, I don't think this is going to pass. We've been talking to people and it's not going to pass. So, am I running out of time? Okay. So, thanks. I hope you support this amendment. And I, Madam President, ask for a recorded roll call vote.
Senator Hogue. Will 8 senators stand for a recorded roll call vote? That is granted. Senator Hogue.
Well, thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I absolutely love the primary residence tax credit. It's brought tax relief to hundreds of thousands of North Dakotans, and I respect the intent of the author of the amendment to bring the amendment. But I would submit to the Senate that this is not the time nor the place to offer this amendment. And I know we're going to have a recorded roll call vote, but I just wonder, Madam President, whether the amendment is out of order, because I don't have my readers with me, but Joint Rule 1006 says that during a special session, any member of the Senate may bring an amendment to the floor, except the member from District 8. Now, I'm still looking. The member from District 8 may bring an unlimited number of floor amendments after the Senate adjourns, sine die. So that's my read on the rule. But is that right? I've got the chairman of the Rules Committee with me, Madam Chair. So I don't want to be technical about it, but I don't think we should support this amendment today.
Senator Dever.
Madam Chair, the most politically neutral word I know is interesting. Interesting. With all due respect to my good friend, sponsor of the amendment, I will raise the germane argument, and I'm not going to ask for a ruling from the president, but I'd like to read from Article 4, Section 13 of the North Dakota State Constitution. It says, no bill may be amended on its passage through either house in a manner which changes its general subject matter. So it was argued that this is kind of the same thing. I think that I'll leave that to the body to decide. So 2 questions. One is, how is this germane? And 2 is, if we pass this amendment and we pass the bill and we go to conference committee, how do we reconcile the difference between the House position and the Senate position? Because I would argue they are not related.
Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, the Senate will proceed with a recorded roll call vote. The Secretary will open the key, and each senator will record his or her vote.
Burkhardt votes no.
Have all senators voted? Does any senator wish to change their vote? The Secretary will close the key and take the tally. Final tally on the amendment reveals 14 ayes, 32 nays, 1 absent. The amendment has failed. Continuing on, the 14th order. Is there any further discussion? Senator Magrum.
Madam President and Senators, thanks for indulging me on that. I respect your decision, and I got a question, I guess, kind of. I'm just wondering why our predecessors never paid for all the school lunches before. I mean, what? So at one point in June 4th, 1946, Harry Truman felt like we should subsidize school lunches. And it was labeled the National School Lunch Act, created as a national security measure to address malnutrition and potential military recruits. The program was aimed to provide nutritious, low-cost, or free lunches to children. But why didn't they expand the program to cover everyone? Why now? Do you think that perhaps the government didn't want to create an entire welfare state? They just wanted to get the children on the bottom that were in malnutrition up to speed so they could recruit them for the military. That was the goal. It wasn't to create a welfare state. People want to be independent. They want to pay their bills. They want to take care of their children. This bill is too big for a special session. I watched the House debate. Several legislators mentioned the same thing as I said. Their constituents weren't interested in free lunch. They want property tax relief. I got several calls over this from my constituents. Not a one of them told me to support free lunch. Not a one, but they said oppose it. The public hasn't had a chance to even come to any committee hearings on this issue. They were left out. We didn't hear any comments from the public. They didn't even know. They heard about it on the media. We're going to take it up. They didn't know what the schedule was. I had people calling and saying, "Hey, what about us? Where are we at on this?" We didn't get to attend any committee hearings and voice our opinion. So we have this so-called poll. We don't know if it's swayed. Who did the poll? Who paid for the poll? We don't know. I don't know. All we're hearing is this poll. It's going to win. How many of you have heard that is from your constituents that they want a free lunch? I don't know. I haven't. Just like I said, the House members all were saying the same thing as I'm saying. I hope we fail this bill. Like I said earlier, let the sponsors of the free lunch measure, let them do the work. You know what? That's going to create public dialogue all summer. People will they're going to go out and get these signatures, and they're going to have to explain, why are you signing this petition? Why do you want this? What's going to be the effect of it? How are we going to pay? They're going to have to explain, why are you signing this petition? Why do you want this? What's going to be the effect of it? How are we going to pay for it? Oil's going down. People are hearing this. They're going to have to go out and get this dialogue going with the people and say, everybody wants a free lunch. Sign this. And they're going to go, well, what's it going to cost? Who's paying? They know that already. That's why they have this bill here. They want us to do the heavy lifting for them. They don't want to go get the signatures and pay the money to do it. They're just going to try to, if you ever played poker, they're trying the poker hand here. You guys, we're going to win, Let them prove it then. If I'm wrong, I'll admit it when they prove it. The people will then show up and vote, which is the ultimate poll, right? It's the ultimate poll. The people will show up and vote. And we know that measures have come and gone. Some have won, some have lost. And there's always this fear that, this is going to pass, or the legislature's not going to have any control over it. In this one, I really don't see where there's any control. It's lunch. You're paying for it or not. Well, if it goes in the Constitution, we have to pay for it. The schools are already in the Constitution. And if it doesn't, then we can still add some subsidies to it next session.
Senator Magrum?
Yeah?
30 seconds.
Okay. So my point is, I don't know if it matters anyway. I just hope we fail this bill and let them do the work. Let the people speak. Let them they'll be able to call into the radio stations and talk amongst themselves and around their kitchen table and decide by next fall if they want to vote for free lunch. So let the people decide when we don't have to So, decide either way. Just fill the bill and let them decide. Let's respect our people and let them decide on this issue. That's all I ask. So I ask for a red vote. Thank you. Madam President, I yield.
Senator Beckedahl.
Thank you, Madam President. I just want to correct the record from a statement by the previous speaker that there was a public hearing held on this bill. It was properly noticed. There were attendees, there was public testimony, and there was testimony submitted online. It was before the Joint Appropriations Committee that was set up for this special session. Whether that's adequate for some people or whether it's adequate for the public, I can't answer that, but I do want the record to show there was public notice and public hearings on this bill.
Senator Van Oosting.
Madam President, thank you. I just wanted to make a shout out to my colleague from District 36 who brought forward House Bill 1627. It is certainly, it's popular. It would be very popular to vote yes on this bill, and it would feel good. But he did such a good job of explaining the availability of the school lunch program that is already here. It is here. There is a free lunch program for a percentage of people that really need it through Medicare and SNAP. It is available. He did explain too in testimony that in his community in the school where he actually served on the board, that less than 20% sign up for it. And it is available, and it's a matter of education. He also explained that maybe it's a problem of signing up. Maybe people need help in getting to that. But I think it's a popular yes vote in some ways. I'm not going to vote yes. I'm going to vote no. Because people aren't educated on the availability of what's out there. So I want to thank my colleague from District 36 that brought 1627 forward. I thought it was the better bill. Thank you.
Senator Lee.
Madam President, just a small correction, and that in the previous speaker's comments, and I'm not arguing one way or the other about the comments, but Medicare is for people over 65 or people in healthcare only. For people over the age of 65 or in special categories, Medicaid is for individuals of all ages, who are lower income. So the program, which I believe she intended to describe, was Medicaid.
Senator Van Oosting.
President, that is correct. Medicaid, sorry. Yep.
Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, the question is on the final passage of House Bill 1624. The Secretary will open the key and each senator will record his or her vote. Have all senators voted?
Yes. Burkhardt votes yes.
Does any senator wish to change their vote? The Secretary will close the key and take the tally. Final tally reveals 22 ayes, 24 nays, 1 absent. The bill is lost.